The cost of stationing American military personnel in Korea, never an easy issue, was always going to be even tougher when President Donald Trump took office in the US. Right from the campaign trail, he'd been complaining about the US getting a raw deal and having to pay too much. And this week we've seen officials from Seoul and Washington meet here in the South Korean capital to thrash out the latest round of negotiations on how much, who should pay for American boots on the ground. But as we'll see, time's running out. I'm Alex Jensen for Korea Now's K-News Today. So it was the 10th round of talks that was held in Seoul. What negotiating teams from the two sides have been discussing is the Special Measures Agreement, a cost-sharing contract set to expire at the end of this year. The fate of the 28,500-strong US Forces Korea, or USFK, is at stake. USFK has a long history. It was established more than 60 years ago. In recent years, pressure's been building for South Korea to pay more of the share for USFK to offer what the US calls operational support, covering costs for the deployment of strategic assets, including some powerful hardware that surely would act as a deterrent for any regional enemies. On the other side, there's counter-pressure, because cynics would say Washington benefits from having tens of thousands of troops on a tense peninsula that's connected by land as well as political and economic interests to China. Now, even at the height of optimism this year, Seoul hasn't seriously moved away from the importance of the US alliance and having American troops here. President Trump, on the other hand, spoke openly in June about wanting to be able to bring those same troops home. Perhaps he doesn't recognize the benefit of having them in South Korea, or maybe he's just prepared to push Seoul to the brink in negotiations. So getting to the numbers, Seoul is paying around 960 billion won, or $859 million this year under the current 5-year agreement that expires in less than a month. As a reference point, you can compare that with 150 billion won when South Korea started sharing the cost in 1991. According to a recent Wall Street Journal report, Trump wants Seoul to pay around double its current amount, the equivalent of $1.6 billion per year for the next 5 years. That would mean the American president is effectively demanding that Seoul pays the entire bill, almost reminiscent of gangster-like protectionism. And if that sounds familiar, remember it was Pyongyang that accused the US of gangster-like demands earlier this year. Not to go off on a tangent, because after all, that is just a report, and North Korea's no stranger to outlandish claims itself. But the point is, all this isn't going to promote a healthy Seoul-Washington alliance. Just play this all out for a moment. Imagine the Korean peninsula without any American troops. What would that do for US interests in the region? Yet we can certainly know that the US wants South Korea to pay more. We recently heard US Ambassador to South Korea, Harry Harris, say the US appreciates the considerable resources the ROK, that is South Korea, provides to support this alliance, but more can and should be done. One of the other issues here is the lack of transparency, which makes increasing the cost of US troops a harder sell for South Korean taxpayers. The 1 trillion won mark is a psychological barrier, certainly, but Seoul will be hoping to enhance the transparency of Washington's related budget spending. Seoul already paid as much as $13 billion to construct Camp Humphreys, the largest overseas US military base, for the relocation of US troops stationed in Seoul and border areas. And another obstacle to pass will be Seoul's National Assembly, where lawmakers will have to approve the new cost-sharing agreement. The US and South Korea have been trying to work all this out while trying to show the North and the rest of the world that the Seoul-Washington alliance is strong. In reality, there are too many question marks hanging over this peninsula right now, and they're obviously not all coming from North Korea.